What if the fiercest warriors of the West faced the most disciplined warriors of the East? The Vikings, storm-born raiders with axes of fury. The samurai, masters of the blade, bound by honor. Steel clashed, shield shattered. Rage met precision. But when bandits attacked the villages, everything changed. Enemies became allies. Viking axes and samurai swords struck together. When the smoke cleared, no words were needed, only respect. The day Vikings and samurai stood as one became legend. History is not written in ink. It is carved in fire and bone. Across oceans, in lands separated by thousands of miles, two warrior cultures rose, each bound by honor, each ruled by steel. The Vikings, born of storm and ice, carved their destiny upon the seas. The samurai, forged in the shadows of Japan's mountains, lived and died by the code of the blade. They never met in life, but imagine if they had. A clash not just of swords, but of worlds. Brutal strength against precise discipline. Wild fury against refined honor. This is the tale of what might have been. The collision of East and West, the Vikings and the samurai. The world of the North was forged in cold. Jagged cliffs overlooked restless seas, and fjords cut deep into the earth like scars left by ancient gods. Out on those waters, longships moved like predators, sleek, fast, built to ride the waves with deadly purpose. Men with axes, swords, and shields filled them, their hair braided, their eyes hard from winters that showed no mercy. They were farmers and traders, but above all, they were raiders. The Vikings. They lived for glory, and glory demanded risk. From the sagas sung by skalds around firelit halls, tales spoke of Odin, all-father of battle and wisdom, and Thor, whose hammer struck lightning across the sky. To die in battle was no tragedy, it was a passage, a key to Valhalla, where endless feasting and fighting awaited. Their gods demanded courage, and so they carved their names into the world with steel and fire. Monasteries burned in the West, kingdoms trembled, and rivers across Europe became highways for their dragon-proud ships. But the Vikings were not just wolves of war. They were explorers. They braved the icy seas to reach lands no one else dared, Greenland, Iceland, even the shores of North America centuries before Columbus. Each voyage was a gamble with death, yet each success etched their legend deeper into history. For them, the sea was both an enemy and a path to eternity. Far across the world, where mountains cloaked in mist rose from the earth and cherry blossoms drifted like pink snow, another warrior order was taking shape. In Japan, as emperors sat distant in gilded courts, power shifted into the hands of those who lived by the sword. They called themselves samurai. Discipline defined them. If the Vikings' strength came from fury, the samurais came from control. They trained their bodies as weapons and sharpened their spirits through a code, Bushido. Honor above all. Loyalty unto death. To serve one's lord was not duty but destiny. To fail was to bring shame, and shame was worse than death. That is why they carried the short blade at their side. Seppuku, ritual suicide, was the last refuge of broken honor. The samurai's world was one of order and precision. Their weapon, the katana, was no crude blade of iron. It was art folded into steel, capable of cutting with the swiftness of wind. Archery, horsemanship, strategy, all were woven into their lives. Where the Viking shield wall was a tide of chaos crashing upon its enemies, the samurai's warfare was a dance, measured, tactical, sharp as the edge of their swords. And just as the Vikings had their gods, the samurai had their spirits. Shinto shrines echoed with prayers to the kami, the divine forces of nature. Ancestors were honored, the spirits of the land revered. Every battle was fought not just in the body, but in the soul, as if the warrior carried all of history upon his shoulders. Two worlds, two codes, two visions of what it meant to live and die as a warrior. One born in the frozen north, where survival itself was war. The other born in the rising sun of Japan, where life was bound to ritual, loyalty, and the blade. But behind every code, behind every legend, there were men. One such man in the far north stood on the prow of his ship as the wind whipped his cloak. He was no stranger to blood. His hands were scarred from years of battle, his eyes the pale gray of a winter sky. To his people,
He was a jarl, a leader, a warlord. Yet he carried more than just ambition. Behind him were families who depended on his strength, and within him, a gnawing hunger for lands beyond the horizon. Across the sea, in Japan, another man walked beneath the blooming sakura trees of his estate. His armor gleamed with lacquered plates, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his katana. He was a daimyo, a lord of his clan, born into the web of duty that bound him tighter than any chain. In his veins ran pride, but in his heart, the weight of expectation pressed heavy. He was protector, judge, and servant of the code. He dreamed not of conquest, but of honor unbroken, of his name carried with reverence long after he was gone. Both men bore burdens greater than themselves. Both understood that war was not a choice. It was a way of survival, a way of life. And though oceans separated them, destiny, in this tale, would pull their worlds together. The storm was already gathering. The north wind would carry ships farther than they had ever gone. The rising sun would reveal strangers at its shores. And when they met, it would not simply be a battle of weapons, but a test of what it truly meant to be a warrior. The sea is never merciful. For weeks, Ragnar's longship had been tossed across waters no Viking had ever dared to sail. The stars they trusted for guidance were hidden behind thick clouds, and the ocean itself seemed intent on swallowing them whole. Men clung to the oars with blistered hands, their beards stiff with salt, their eyes hollow with hunger. Yet Ragnar stood at the bow, his knuckles white upon the wooden dragon's head, refusing to bow to the sea. "We are not meant to die in silence," he growled to himself. "We are meant to die in battle." At last, when the storm's fury broke, a coastline rose like a phantom from the mist, green mountains, strange forests, and villages unlike any they had seen before. It was not the land of the Franks, nor the coasts of England. This was a world beyond their maps. On the shore, the people of Japan had already seen the ships. Samurai scouts reported to their lord, Takeda Haru, that strange vessels with dragon heads had appeared like omens upon the waves. Their sails were woven differently. Their warriors carried axes instead of blades. To the samurai, they seemed like demons from the sea. Haru prepared. He summoned his retainers, armored them in lacquer cuirasses, and ordered the archers to line the hills above the bay. "If they come in peace, we will offer them welcome. If they come in war, the gods will judge them." The first meeting was not one of words, but of suspicion. Ragnar and a small band of his men stepped onto the sand, raising their shields as arrows glimmered from the ridges above. Haru rode down from the hill, his horse clad in armor, his katana at his side. Their eyes met. One man from the far north, carved by ice and storm, the other from the far east, tempered by duty and law. Neither spoke the other's tongue, but in their gaze, both understood. This would not be easy. The clash began when a nervous Viking, frightened by the sight of mounted warriors, hurled his spear. It struck harmlessly into the dirt, but that single act was enough. Arrows rained down like black snow. Shields locked together in a wall. The Vikings roared, their voices echoing against the cliffs. The samurai advanced with precision, their blades flashing in the dim light. It was strength against discipline. The Viking shield wall surged forward like a tide, axes cleaving through bamboo spears. The samurai countered with cavalry, horses crashing against men in a thunder of hooves and steel. The beach became chaos. Screams of the dying, the hiss of arrows, the clash of iron on iron. And yet, in the heart of that chaos, both Ragnar and Haru fought with a grim clarity. Ragnar's axe split helmets. His shield shoved back enemies, twice his size. Haru's katana sang through the air, each strike deliberate, each motion a reflection of years of training. It was as though the gods themselves had set them as mirrors against each other, wild power against refined precision. The battle dragged into the night, lit only by torches and the moon's pale fire. Men fell, the sand turned red, but neither side could claim victory. A storm rose again from the sea, and thunder rolled across the mountains. Nature itself seemed to demand an end. The Vikings staggered back to their ships. The samurai withdrew to their fortresses. Both leaders, battered and weary, looked back across the field of the dead. They had not won. They had not lost. But both knew this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were uneasy ones. Neither the Vikings nor the samurai could claim victory, yet neither could forget the clash. Every night, Ragnar's men sharpened their axes by the firelight, their voices low, haunted by the precision of their enemies. And on the other side, Haru's retainers repaired their armor, whispering about the foreigners whose rage was like a storm. But fate was not finished with them. One morning, the mists rolled back to reveal a new threat. Bandits, Ronin who had abandoned their lords, descended upon the coastal villages, burning homes and cutting down farmers. They were no samurai, but their cruelty was unmatched. The Vikings, desperate for supplies, at first thought to take advantage of the chaos. Yet Ragnar stood upon the hill, watching the smoke rise, and felt something stir within him. These were not enemies of war. These were innocents. Against his men's protests, Ragnar led a charge not against the samurai, but against the bandits. Axes and shields slammed into the lawless warriors, scattering them across the fields. From the opposite side, Haru and his samurai arrived, blades flashing in the sunlight. For a heartbeat, it seemed the two forces would once again collide, but then, in the fire and screams, they realized they were striking the same foe. It was chaos, but it was unity. A Viking shield locked beside a samurai spear. An axe defended where a katana cut. They fought together, not as enemies, but as warriors bound by honor. Blood mingled on the earth, and the cries of the villagers echoed with hope instead of terror. When the last of the bandits fled into the forests, a silence fell. Ragnar lowered his axe. Haru sheathed his blade. They stood face to face again, this time, not as enemies, but as men who had fought the same storm. Neither spoke the other's tongue, yet they did not need to. A nod was enough. A glance was enough. Respect had been forged in fire. In the days that followed, the Vikings were given shelter, food, and a chance to repair their ships. They marveled at the rituals of the samurai, their discipline, their devotion to duty. The samurai, in turn, studied the raw ferocity of the Norsemen, their fearlessness before death, their bond of brotherhood. Two worlds that should never have touched had collided, and something new had been born. But destiny demanded separation. The Vikings could not remain in Japan. Their homes lay across the endless sea, and the samurai could not allow outsiders to remain forever in their land. So one evening, under a crimson sunset, Ragnar and Haru met for the last time. No feast, no celebration, just a simple farewell. Ragnar touched his chest, then pointed toward Haru, a silent gesture of honor. Haru bowed, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, a promise of eternal respect. The longships pushed away from the shore. Oars dipped into the darkening sea. From the cliffs above, samurai banners fluttered in the wind. Neither side knew if they would ever meet again. Yet both carried the memory. The day the Vikings of the West and the samurai of the East fought, bled, and stood together. History never recorded their battle. No scroll spoke of it, no sagas sang its name. Yet in the shadows of time, legends whisper of the day when East met West, not in conquest, not in submission, but in honor. And perhaps, if you close your eyes, you can still hear it. The roar of axes, the song of blades, and the silence of two warriors nodding in respect across a blood-soaked field.